Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, now leasing Phase 3 at the Reserve, and the B.L. Manger Foundation. This special series of Jewish Insights on Pnimiyut HaTorah, the inner wisdom of Torah, in celebration of Shavuot, is brought to you in part by Share.
There's an inner rhythm pulsating beneath the surface. It whispers ancient truths, guiding the curious, the seekers and the dreamers towards something deeper, something timeless, something inside us all. Welcome to Pnimiyut, the inner dimension. Welcome to Share. We founded Share to bring the Torah's deepest wisdom to life, providing a home for holistic and inspired living. We know that we need to meet people exactly where they're at every stage of their journey. This is why we partner with established organizations and dynamic entrepreneurs through 5 core channels to share this wisdom. We believe the future of Pnimiyut lies in the hands of those who live it, learn it, and teach it. That's why we are dedicated to amplifying the voices of scholars and nurturing and empowering the next generation of leaders. Learning is at the heart of everything we do. Our goal is to equip schools, organizations, and educators alike with the tools they need to share this meaningful content with their students and community. The digital world has democratized education, offering connections in unprecedented ways. From dazzling masterclasses to cinematic productions, from short-form bursts of wisdom to thought-provoking conversations, we are blending high-quality production with compelling storytelling to share Pnimiyut teachings across the world. Nothing can replace an authentic encounter with the written word. Our publications aim to unlock the most profound Pnimiyut texts for the curious mind. The goal of Pnimiyut is to enhance our actual lives, whether it's connecting deeply at immersive retreats or sparking creativity through our gatherings and summits. Each experience leaves a lasting impact. Share's vision is for a world where the teachings of Pnimiyut guide every moment of one's life. This is more than a mission, it's a movement. And the moment for this movement is now. As the Zohar says, one day, even children will understand the simplicity of the hidden wisdom that will be revealed to everyone. Welcome to Share. Welcome to the inner dimension.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights as we continue our special series during the Omer leading up to receiving the Torah on Shavuot by exploring Pnimiyut HaTorah or Pnimiyus HaTorah, depending who you're speaking with, the inner dimension of Torah that helps us live with more depth, more purpose, and more connection. I'm joined by someone who truly embodies this inner wisdom in a way that's joyful, creative, and deeply grounded, Rochie Pinson. Rochie is a Rebbetzin, a mother, an artist, a spiritual teacher, and a best-selling author whose passion for challah has become a gateway to Jewish connection for people all over the world. Her first cookbook, Rising, the Book of Challah, has inspired Jewish women across the globe to bring meaning and beauty into their Shabbos tables. And her second book, Kids' Book of Challah, is helping an entire new generation fall in love with Jewish life, one braid at a time. Together we'll explore the power of challah, as well as the other commandments unique to women in our Jewish tradition, the hidden wisdom of Torah during this time of year, and God willing, we'll find ourselves one step closer to Mashiach by the end.
Amen to that.
Amen. Welcome. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Thank you.
I think I'm the only person in my family who hasn't spent time with you. My mother's done 2 challah bakes with you. My niece Emma did her challah bake with you.
Amazing.
My wife's done challah bakes with you. Many famous people have done challah bakes with you. It's exciting for me to join the crowd here.
Yes.
So thank you.
I don't think we're going to get any actual challah baking done today, but
that crossed my mind. I was like, could we do it in studio challah
You know,
baking?
maybe next time we'll come on and make challah with everybody.
Well, we got to build a kitchen in the back of. Although you don't have to,
that's
is what I've learned. All right. So before we get to all the amazing things, let's just start with who you are and where you're from. First time on JBS. Most of our crowd, some know you, some don't, but just bring us up to speed. Who are you, and how did we get here? Just briefly.
Who are we, and how did we get here? I mean, I think these are the big questions in life. So I don't know if we're going to cover it in an hour, but just to give you a little bit of background. So I grew up Chabad in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I was born and raised. And my parents were sent there as the Chabad emissaries, or shluchim, some 50 years ago. And I was born there shortly after their arrival, so you can do the math. And I grew up, kind of in this leadership role, just by default, being born into it.
They ask to go somewhere, or they get sent somewhere, and then when you're a child growing up in that home, you're kind of told, like, you're going to do the same thing we're doing when you get older? Like, just say a word.
Oh, I don't think you're told anything. And I mean, everybody chooses their own path, and not everyone chooses to, do the same thing their parents did. But I do think it's almost hard to separate your identity from the way you're raised in general. And it's so part of the fabric of your being when you grow up in that mode, that every part of who you are is sort of involved in this shlichut, in this mission.
You're raised as a leader, you were saying.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're raised that your parents are sort of the community leaders, I guess, much as anybody else who may have parents in a leadership role, where they feel like you're a little bit in the spotlight growing up. You're kind of used to being sort of setting a standard or setting an example by who you are. You're not anonymous in that way, and you kind of feel like you represent. So there's a certain sense of responsibility that you have. That you're not just showing up as, me the individual, but as representing something larger than yourself.
Beautiful. And your profession is intertwined with your family. Like when you're and maybe you're comfortable answering this, maybe you're not, but like when you're, let's call it, preparing to get married, is there some sense of like, okay, I'm looking for a partner that's looking to do this work together with me in some vision?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I married another Chabad person, and he was not particularly looking to lead a community per se or be like a pulpit rabbi, but he is a scholar, an author, a thinker, and then, I mean, when I met him, he had already written his first manuscript.
Wow.
And he was only 24, so he was well on his way to becoming who he is today, but we kind of figured it out. We didn't leave right away. We didn't start a community right away, and we did it in our own way on our own time.
Bring me into how you got into challah, for lack of a better term, and spirituality.
Yeah. So I like to say, like, I never sat down with a guidance counselor, and they never, said, like, yeah, maybe you should, consider a career in challah. I still don't know what a career in challah exactly is, but it's kind of what I'm doing. Somehow it took on a life of its own. So yeah, I did not actually grow up making challah, which is usually surprising to people, especially knowing that I was raised Chabad. So we were one of the only kosher keeping families in Vancouver, British Columbia, when I was growing up. Now the community has expanded, but then it was very small, still pretty small. So everything that was kosher sort of had to be made from scratch. And that was how I was raised. Looking back, that was a pretty healthy way to grow up. There was no takeout, there was no eating out. But the only thing that was actually never made from scratch in my home was challah. So there was one little tiny kosher bakery that made one type of bread, and it was challah. And that was just very lucky for my mom. Well, first of all, because there was actually one thing she didn't have to make, but particularly because she had a lot of fear surrounding challah. So she had her negative experience with challah, and I think, like, if anyone's watching this, there are people everywhere I go, and I travel the world speaking about challah, teaching challah, and there's always someone who raises their hand and be like, that's me, challah PTSD, but people will have a negative experience. It won't work out. And I think my mom's story involved her mother-in-law. So there was like a lot surrounding it, and it was really bad. My dad says actually it was so bad that they put it out on their fire escape. They were living in Brooklyn at the time. And he said the animals, like the Brooklyn animals, would not touch that challah. It was that bad. So yeah, so she was just like not having any of it, and just God was very kind to her. They moved to a place that had, it's like the irony, you know, nothing else kosher. We used to go to the farm, milk the cows, and bring home that milk. She'd make that into cheese. Like that's
No way.
That's how we would
my
eat.
God.
I mean, except for challah. So. That was like the one thing. So
Hashem gave her what she
so
needed.
Of course, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
And by the way, that's a whole separate conversation, but it raises the challenge of going to these, sometimes, you know, Vancouver is a major metropolitan city at least, but people are from Chabad are going to far-flung cities where there's no infrastructure, and you have to imagine food, raising your kids, Jewish education, having friends, and they're out on an island a little bit. Wow. Okay.
And Vancouver was not a major metropolis when I was growing up. Like it really wasn't. It was a little hick. It was a little small town. Now it kind of is on the map a little bit. But yeah, it was very small, especially Jewishly. Yeah.
There's kind of been this like swelling of like people getting into baking challah, and I think in the past, and I'm projecting here and then you run with it, there's kind of been like a focus on like, let's say like, oh, who makes the tastiest challah, to reference your, you know, the trauma story. But there's a whole separate piece now, I feel like, around like the spiritual side of challah. So I'm going to stop talking because I know very little about this, but jump in. Talk to me about, bring us into challah. Why is it a special mitzvah? What's going on with challah? Tell us the whole story.
All right. The whole story.
About challah.
We only have an hour.
And we want to get to other things too.
Noted, I wrote, 2 full books on this and like 700 pages, so there's a lot to talk about. But yeah, so, so just to talk about how I come to this, because I didn't come to this like from that route, the typical route.
You didn't grow up making it with your mommy at all.
Well, right, but then also like most people who write a cookbook, they just love spending time in the kitchen, or they're just really passionate about baking or cooking, and so that's usually the question I get, like what prompted you to write an entire cookbook on challah, right? Like what were you thinking?
Yeah.
So I'll take you a little bit through my journey, just to like give you a little bit of background. So the very first time I baked challah was kind of an emergency.
Okay.
So I was a newlywed myself. Didn't even know challah could be made at home. I thought it grew in a bakery. And my husband and I were asked to go to Kobe, Japan. So here you have another Chabad story, right? If you're Chabad, you kind of see the world like the Peace Corps Chabad.
Sure.
And we get a phone call from the headquarters that they have a community, that there is this little shul in Kobe, and they don't have a rabbi in Rebbetzin, and the high holidays are approaching, and would we be interested in, filling that slot for the time being? So we did. Like, that was a great adventure, and we headed out there and got there a couple of days before Rosh Hashanah.
Oh my God.
And sit down with the community leaders, and of course I know very little, and I'm very innocent and naive, and I asked the shul president, so where does one buy challah in Kobe? So then he looks at me a little worried perhaps, and says, no, I don't think you understand. In Kobe, the Rebbetzin makes the challah. For those who don't know, Rebbetzin is rabbi's wife. It's kind of honorary title that comes with the position. The Rebbetzin is the one who makes the challah for the whole community.
Oh my God.
So here I am. Officially, I'm the Rebbetzin. Officially, I'm going to be baking challah for the whole community.
Talk about first year of marriage challenges.
Yeah,
by the
exactly,
way. Like,
exactly. That's kind of an unusual one. Yeah. You've never baked challah? How about try it for
Fly to Japan and build.
Try doing 50 pounds for your first attempt. And that's what I did. I went into that kitchen and I proceeded to figure it out. And it was, quite the adventure. And at the end, I did end up with some 50 challahs, and they rose. It's all about the rising, right? That's what I called my book. And it was just a really incredible experience when I was feeding those challahs to the community. It really felt very powerful, like I was sharing a part of myself in a way that was very new to me.
Wow.
Felt very grounding, but also very connective to who I am as a woman and my role. And it just felt great. And I loved it. I was hooked. So
Say one more
yeah.
sentence on that also. Like, in terms of giving of yourself, you're saying, like, just play that out. Is it because, like, you've made something that's enhancing their Shabbat experience? Is it because, like, some piece of you is in the challah? Is it because of the taste?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, but I definitely think that energetically, when you create challah, it's very immersive. And you're really putting a lot of yourself into it's a process. And it's very hands-on. It's unlike the other processes in the kitchen, where there's a lot of, it's very quick and you're mixing and you don't feel like it's actually coming from you in the same way, whereas the challah process and the kneading and then the taking off the piece of dough and making the blessing, which is where the word challah comes from, and that's the mitzvah. That's the part that's from the Torah. That's the part that, the divine directive that is called challah. And just that whole experience of connecting to this practice, which is uniquely feminine and is part of the three mitzvot of the Jewish woman.
Sure.
So activating that, like being like, wow, I never did this. This is like my heritage. This is part of what it means to be a Jewish woman. And then feeding the challahs to the people felt like, it's the work of your hands. You're shaping it, you're braiding it, you're creating something that, no one's challahs are going to look just like yours and taste just like yours. And I always get that. People will tell me, oh, I make your challah every week, everywhere I go, I'll get these. And I'm like, no, it's actually, it's yours.
Right.
Like, you're using my recipe, but this is your challah, and it really is.
Beautiful.
It becomes a very personal thing. So that's when I kind of decided that I'm going to make challah, and it's going to be a part.
Time in Japan. Wow.
Yeah, that's where kind of my passion for it started, but it built from there, and it really went into once we started building our own community, and
that's where?
That was in Park Slope,
Okay.
Brooklyn, in South Slope, Gowanus area, for anyone who's familiar or very particular about. And it depends what kind of real estate you're trying to sell. Like, you'll call it Gowanus or you'll call it South Slope or whatever, but. That was when I started to really experience how the challah was speaking to women, and that it was like sort of answering this call that women, there was a void, let's say, that women who were otherwise super successful in their lives, in their careers and every other aspect, but just felt this sort of disconnect from who they were, like in their feminine being. And challah was sort of a really beautiful way for them to reconnect, and then to connect to the larger picture of their Judaism and their connection to the Jewish tradition. But, who's going to resist challah? So challah really was like a great entryway for women.
Great. So I want to unpack a little bit of that. You mentioned a few things. So first, this idea of like, well, there's actually a mitzvah related to the challah. So I think most people think like, you're supposed to bake challah on Shabbat because you're supposed to have challah on Shabbat. And maybe they don't know why we have challah on Shabbat, and also maybe they don't know why this idea of hafrashat challah that you mentioned, like the separating the dough. Just tell us a little bit.
So what is challah?
Yeah.
What is challah in a nutshell? So, it's kind of confusing because the original term for challah is actually, it's a biblical term. And as we're entering into the land of Israel for the very first time, and we're about to have to start getting really concerned with our sustenance and how we're going to earn a living and plant and grow. Till now, we've been in the desert and being provided with manna from heaven, and it's like, it's going to be a whole new reality. And then we're given all these divine directives that will allow us to connect, even as we're getting really involved with mundane day-to-day life. Many of these directives were only for the land of Israel, or only for temple times. But this particular directive, to remove the beginning of your dough, a little piece of your dough, and to gift it to the priests who served in the temple, this was actually, we were told, was a directive for all time, for all generations. So it becomes one of those mitzvot, or divine opportunities for connection.
Beautiful
I don't love
translation.
the word commandment. Doesn't resonate with me, but I do feel like the word mitzvah actually comes from the word tzavta v'chibur, like this idea of connection. And each mitzvah really is an opportunity to connect,
Beautiful.
deeper to a part of ourselves and to the oneness of everything. And that's what a mitzvah is. So I'll say directive or commandment or mitzvah. They're interchangeable. So this one becomes one that we take with us into the diaspora, that we take with us wherever we've traveled in the world, and it's kept us connected. So the piece of dough that we removed that was given to the priest, that was called challah. Over generations, centuries, millennia, we're an old people, this we've kind of started calling the bread that we serve for our Shabbat and our holiday meals, challah. So that term, challah, becomes used for sort of anything that is special or set aside for a holier, sacred purpose. And actually in the Torah, the word challah is, in Talmudic sources, there's actually, it's used in many different contexts. So Adam, who's the first human.
Sure.
Many people don't know that the first human was actually a hybrid, right, of male and female. So when people say Adam, they think Adam, the man. It's actually the first, there's kind of two biblical narratives of creation. Sure. Speaking to a rabbi, you're familiar with this. And the first creation story, there's one human, and this human is both Zachar and Nekeva bara otam. It's created as sort of both male and female. And Adam is referred to as chalato shel olam. It's the challah of the earth. So humans, as being given this unique role in creation to be the stewards of creation, are the challah of the olam. We're the ones who are going to bring a higher consciousness to the world. So we are sacred in a way. And so this word challah comes up a lot. And it's always kind of referring to something that we remove from the other to declare it sacred and for a higher purpose.
Why two? Why are there two pieces of challah?
Oh, you're asking all the good questions.
Well,
absolutely.
I think many people in here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. There's so many traditions surrounding bread in every culture.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, when you're Jewish, this is the whole joke. If we had a Christmas tree, we'd have like a whole, tractate in Gemara and like how to bring it in the house. So of course, every other tradition has a lot surrounding bread, but we take the cake or the challah, as it were, on the subject. So yeah, I have a whole section in my cookbook, which is much more than just a cookbook. It's really it's a tome on challah.
Oh, I'm going to own that. I'm learning that from talking to you now. I didn't realize that because I was like, it's a cookbook.
No.
It's clearly there's a lot of literature there, which is not a bad thing. Cookbooks are amazing.
No, the first, I actually started off by writing a book on challah.
Yeah.
And then I was like, who's picking up a book on challah? Like everyone's like looking for the recipe. So I'm like, I'm going to sneak the book into, and I kind of like cannibalized my book, and I put the whole book into the cookbook. And then I'm also an artist and a designer, so I was like, it's got to be gorgeous. It's got to be, a coffee table book of challah essentially, and so that's what I did with it. But where were we? I lost my train of thought.
You're telling me why
the two challahs, right? So all the traditions surrounding challah. So so there are many traditions surrounding challah, and one of them is that we always serve two, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Like everything in Judaism, multiple opinions. So first of all, there's it calls to mind the double portion of manna that fell on Friday. So when we were traveling in the desert, and every day we'd go out and collect our daily portion of manna, which sort of represents this idea of the 6 work days, the 6 weekdays where we're making things happen and creating and participating in creation. And then on Friday, a double portion of manna fell so that we wouldn't have to collect on Saturday, on Shabbat. And that was sort of the first experience of trust, of being able to trust that there was going to be enough. And that's kind of the whole idea of Shabbat. So when we put the 2 chalot, we're recalling the double portion of manna and sort of making a statement that we can take one day of the week and dedicate it to just being, not changing anything, not creating, and we trust in the higher source of our sustenance.
Beautiful.
And bread is the most powerful expression of our sustenance. It's really the basic, it's the staff of life.
Right.
So what better way than with the bread? So that's one of the reasons.
For you personally, when you're baking challah, when does that happen and how does that happen and what does it look like?
All right, that's a great question. So there's a kind of, there's the basic time of prayer, which would be when you actually pull off the piece of dough and you make the blessing.
So that's the moment. There's this big like pounds of challah, for lack of a better term. What's the minimum? What is it again?
The minimum is 5. It's about 3.5 pounds. It depends who you ask. Of course.
Right. So
I have a whole graph in my
If you're
cookbook
making enough
too.
challah for more than just your home,
Yes,
likely
exactly,
is what it sounds
exactly.
like.
You need to make a larger.
Right.
And that speaks to also when we give, we need to have what to give, right?
Beautiful, right? So
Yeah.
we're not only baking for our own home, but you're going to bring it to someone else, and that's a
Yeah.
beautiful gift to be able to give.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's that moment where you kind of immerse yourself in silence, and you're pulling out a piece, and as you're pulling it out, you're saying the blessing there, and
Yeah.
taking time to like really
Yeah,
get
to
in.
focus. I mean, it's a very powerful statement. When you're pulling off that piece of dough, you're really stating that you understand that you are not merely particles of matter in this world, that you are in essence a soul, and that you're connected to that which is infinite and eternal. And at that moment, you're really tapping into the soul of everything and the soul of who you are. So it's, if we were just about survival and it was just an animal living on this animal instinctive primal level, we would never do this. We would not take off from what we're creating to feed our family, what we've worked for, what we've, put together here, and this is what we're feeding our, in this time of abundance, sometimes we lose perspective.
Sure.
But, this is your bread for your family. Like, you're taking off a piece that sort of just goes against all of our survival instincts, but it speaks to the part of us which transcends merely
There's something
surviving.
bigger than us.
There's
bigger than
something bigger
survival.
than us.
So we
We're
pull
living
out.
for a higher purpose. We're living with a higher awareness.
Wow.
And that's where kind of the challah practice introduces spirituality and meaning into the home. The kitchen is the center of the home. It's the heartbeat, and the woman is the high priestess of her home, and that's where all of the 3 mitzvot really speak to, and we can get into that later if you want, to how we mirror the service of the priests in the temple, and how we sort of carry that tradition into the modern age through our observance of these mitzvot. But this moment is very powerful. It's like, okay, I'm not simply matter. There's a part of me which existed before this body came into this world, and there's a part of me that's going to continue to exist eternally in the eternal consciousness of everything. And I want to tap into that part. I want to draw my blessings from that source of everything, where everything exists in potential. And
Beautiful.
But every step in making the challah is also a powerful opportunity for connection.
Beautiful, beautiful. You're raising 2 questions for me. I'll
Yeah.
say, can you, right, it's clear that I kind of pass by and I'm not in it. Every once in a while I ask my wife a question and I realize that she's in the middle of davening and I'm like, I'm so sorry. But
I love that.
Are there other parts of the challah baking process that you want to highlight, and like what's powerful about them for you?
It really is a recipe for life. It nourishes life. We've survived on bread. We can literally survive on bread and water.
Right.
So, society has gotten a little gluten freaked out.
Right.
And oh my gosh, so living in Park Slope,
Yeah.
writing my challah cookbook at the height of the gluten-free craze. Everybody and their dogs were gluten-free
my
at that
God.
point. And I'm like, what am I doing writing a book on bread?
Yeah.
But I think we're healing from that a little bit. And we've survived on bread and water for thousands of years. It really is the essence of our survival. So this recipe is one that nourishes life at the most basic level. It's kind of speaks to what it means to survive, right? So every ingredient that goes into the bowl is so significant. And there's very little that's actually needed to create a bread. And I talk about the ingredients, flour represents the body, water represents the soul. These are themes that come up a lot in Kabbalistic teachings. And so you're putting them together, that's basically all you need. That has everything,
Wow.
Salt is great for balance, also in our bodies, right? It's also part of one of the most important, we're mainly water, right? And salt is going to keep us in balance. So all of the ingredients that go in speak to sort of the balance of life on planet Earth, in our bodies, in a microcosm. And then, so you're putting together this recipe and you're essentially creating this life-giving nourishment through using these ingredients of life. So every step in the process of making it is powerful. And then, of course, there's the kneading process, which most people think of as just kind of like, okay, I'm mixing the dough together. But it really is one of the essential parts of the process of making bread, particularly challah, which requires challah. When I say challah, by the way, and we've already spoken to what we talk about as challah, but challah doesn't always look the way it looks today. Like when you go to a bakery and you ask for challah, like the kind you want to make your French toast out of on Sunday morning, that's just like 16th century Eastern Europe. But, I have a whole section in my cookbook where I wrote about what different communities around the world would serve as their challah for Shabbat or the holidays. And every community had, whether you were in Bukhara or Iraq or Yemen or Morocco or
Kobe, Japan.
Or right. Wherever you might find yourself, there was indigenous cultures, and we adapted and had our own version of what would go on our Shabbat table. So when I say challah, and everyone's picturing that gorgeous braided, loaf that we get at the bakery, that's challah as we know it now. But there's, so the challah as we know it now requires intensive kneading because it's a very dense crumb, which is the inside of the bread, so and we want to braid it and shape it into something intricate and beautiful, sometimes also very meaningful, depending on what shape you're making. So to do that, there's a lot of kneading involved. And the kneading process is actually where you're developing the dough. And so that's a really meditative process as well, like especially in this day and age where everything is instant. That really is a time when you have to kind of stop. And I find that to be a really good time for prayer and intention.
Give me an example of like using a particular shape to add meaning to the challah.
All right. So we're recording this not too long after Passover.
Sure.
All right. So there's actually an ancient tradition that's taken on a whole new life with social media because it lends itself to great social media posts and the week after Passover there's a tradition to shape your bread into your challah into a key shape. Or to put your house key into the challah. I'm sure you've heard of it.
For sure.
Unless you're living under a rock.
We had some key with our challah, for sure.
So I get this question every year. I'm always getting these messages. Is this pagan?
Right.
Is this like this kind of looks weird? Or is this really a Jewish tradition?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's born from the Jewish women themselves who created this. And we don't know the exact source, but we do know that the Aptarov, who was known as the Ohev Yisrael.
Okay.
So he writes about this tradition. He's like maybe one of the earliest sources like bringing it up, but he writes that it's an ancient practice done by Jewish women. So that's, I guess, late 1700s, early 1800s.
And this is you either put your actual key in the challah to discover it,
right.
let's say,
so,
or you
shape
bake it in the shape of a
key
challah.
And
Right.
So,
and what's
and if
happening
you're
there?
Ashkenazi and you want to cover all your bases because you're OCD, then you just do them both.
Both, of course.
And then you stick in everybody else's key just to be safe,
And what's it about?
Yeah, so that's about, it's about asking to special prayers to unlock the keys of sustenance. We're bringing back the chametz, we're bringing back the leavened bread after taking
Passover.
a break. And historically, as we enter into the land of Israel, that was when the manna stopped falling, right after the first Passover. And we started bringing the barley offering, the omer. And that was when we started having to worry for our own sustenance. So that's when we start praying for sustenance, and we ask that the gates of heaven are unlocked. Symbolically, it's a way of recalling the source and remembering that as we're going to get involved in the dough once again, and bringing home the dough, where is the source of all of our blessings, and not to disconnect from that.
Beautiful, I love that. Okay, and now you mentioned the three. I'll call them three, but you'll tell me if I'm wrong. But the mitzvot, which are unique. I shouldn't say mitzvot. I shouldn't say commandments. You taught me.
Well, no, you can. That is a translation.
The divine opportunities that are unique to women. Just first of all, place us. Like, what are they? And then let's talk a little bit more. So challah is certainly maybe the most famous. Let's
one
say.
of them.
Yeah, or maybe not.
You know what? It's funny because it really did have as we stopped making our own food, and when packaged foods and processed foods became a thing, and then you would just buy your challah in a bakery, we lost it for a little while.
Right.
So I feel like there's been a revival of challah as the mitzvah of the woman. And I felt like in the beginning when I was teaching this, I would encounter so many women who were, had a Jewish home and were doing Shabbat observant, but they never made challah. And so it's coming back. Like more and more now, it's harder to encounter someone who hasn't tried it. So I'm happy to see that there's been a revival, and I hope in some way I've been a little bit of a part of that.
For sure.
All right, so the 3 mitzvot of the woman would be the act of removing the piece of dough, making the blessing, otherwise known as the mitzvah of challah. And someone else can make the dough for you. And someone else can bake the bread for you. It's just the role of the woman. If there is no woman around, a man can do the mitzvah, as with many of the mitzvot that are particular to the male in the household. If there's no male around, the woman can do them as well. It's just, when there is a male and female in the picture, this is uniquely for the woman to practice.
So the first one is challah.
Challah. The second one would be the lighting of the Shabbat candles to welcome the Shabbat and begin the Shabbat observance in the home. And the third is the mikvah, is the practice of a woman separating, or I would say a couple separating at the time of a woman's period and after childbirth, which actually we're reading about in the Torah these days, and then completing that process by going into a mikvah and going through that purification ritual before reuniting with her husband. So those are the 3 mitzvot of the woman. And
let's spend a little time on them. Great. So we talked about a little bit about challah. Let's talk about candles. What's for you? You shared some of the mystical meanings behind challah. The average person knows we light candles on Friday night, but maybe not much more beyond that. Tell me a little bit around when you think of the mitzvah of lighting candles on Shabbat. What's going on there?
Okay, so let me step back, zoom out a little bit.
Sure.
So I'll give you a little bit of a perspective of how all of these 3 are connected.
Oh, cool.
To this sort of role of the Jewish woman that is particular to the woman. So all of these 3, and we mentioned a little bit in the beginnings, they sort of mirror the service of the priests in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, which then becomes the temple in Jerusalem. And there were the priests who served in the role of sort of carrying out these traditions for the people.
I'm a priest.
Could
have been me. Could have been me.
The presence of priesthood.
There you go. I had someone. I was with someone last night in the class. Someone told me someone came up with them with an envelope with challah inside recently and said, "I'm giving you my piece of my challah."
Oh, I love that.
Priest. I was like, I've never had that experience.
No, okay.
So times have changed.
Maybe next time I turn off the challah, I can just hand it to you.
Send it by FedEx. I'll wait for it.
FedEx.
There you go. All right. So keep going. So it reflects the temple.
So the service of the temple, which was sort of meant to be a physical space in this world where we could encounter the divine, right? Where we could use the beauty of what was happening around us, the ceremony and the traditions, to tap into something beyond our day-to-day life, to encounter transcendence, as it were.
Beautiful.
And the role of the priest was to carry out these practices. And they had a lot of things they did, but there were 3 main services that they would do. And one was to bring the offerings. The other one was to light the menorah, to create the ambiance for the temple, to light this eternal light that always needed to be burning. And then the third one was be involved in the rituals of purification. So to help people determine if they were in a state of purity or impurity. And of course in the Torah, purity and impurity, just to clarify, is not clean and unclean. It refers to whether something is in a state of life or disconnected from a state of life. And Judaism is a religion of life. It's a practice of life. We are all about always being connected to hope and to growth and possibility and movement, forward movement. So tameh, or impurity, comes from the word like satum, which means to be closed off. So anytime a person is, if God forbid a person is in mourning, or if they are, in some way connected to death or loss of life or hope, that puts them into a state of impurity, and then they go through a process of coming back into the community and into a state of life. So for the priests, that this was their role, to help people determine if they needed to go through, they had to be very careful in their own lives about their own state of purity and not getting too involved in the drama of life and staying sort of in this state of purity.
To this day, I can't go to a cemetery.
Right. So the priesthood still applies in many ways today, which is fascinating. And there's the Cohen gene, too. Right. Have you ever done your genetics?
I have not done genetics.
You haven't done the genetics. So there's that Cohen gene, right, that they said they found in tribes around the world, which is particular to the family of Aaron. Which is fascinating.
My Zadie.
Yeah. It was Aaron?
I'm saying.
You're Zadie.
No, but no, we have the name Pinchas in our family also, who was also a famous Cohen.
That's right, so grandson of Aaron. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. All right, so I hear you saying that actually these unique mitzvot for women in some ways reflect some of the core values of what was happening in the temple.
Absolutely. And what, since we've entered the diaspora a few thousand years ago, and haven't had that physical space, we've become a portable people. Our Torah is it's a book of life we take with us everywhere, and our temples are now our homes. And, people think that, worship means going to a place of worship, such as a synagogue or a temple, and, doing their thing there and then going back into life. But Judaism is about every single moment. It's about achieving transcendence through our day-to-day life. I love this about the word challah, by the way. If you break it down, and Hebrew is amazing like this in general, there's so much depth. The word actually is chol, which means mundane or everyday, weekday, right? Our day-to-day reality. And then if you add the hey, it becomes challah. And that hey is like breath, right? And we're told that the whole world is created through speech, through breath itself. So it's kind of like that transcendent breath that's breathed into us, the soul. And when you marry those two, then you elevate every day. And that's kind of the role of the woman, which is a very, even just biologically, woman is the carrier of life, and the builder of relationships, the nourisher, the nurturer. And in creating a home, we have an opportunity to create something that transcends the four walls, that goes beyond the physical space, but infusing every aspect of our home life with an awareness of the divine, of the part of us that is larger than the immediate, that is eternal. So in these practices, the lighting of the Shabbat candles mirrors the lighting of the menorah. I know we tend to think of the menorah as the Chanukiah, which we light on Hanukkah, which is very particular to that holiday. But the menorah in the temple was lit every single day, morning and night. It was always remained lit. And so this idea of lighting the Shabbat candles is really to transform the quality of the ambiance in the home and to create an environment that is sacred and other, and introduce Shabbat into the home. So that's the role of the woman. We create that ambiance, that awareness of the spirit. Through the challah, we infuse our sustenance and our, they say the guy brings home the dough and the wife turns it into challah, right? And even though today we're all doing everything, it's really nice to go back to that sort of primal urge to nourish. And I think that's what speaks to women so powerfully when they learn challah, is that they reconnect with that part of themselves, that innate desire to nurture. And but to do it in a way that just goes beyond the body and really touches the soul as well. And of course the mikvah, which is the practice of purification, and it's kind of, the woman is the last sort of stronghold of that in this world right now. So we don't have the ritual purification that we had, but the mikvah, which is a body of water, and it can be a natural body of water, or we've created these pools according to a very specific set of, for better words, specifications. And it's not just any swimming pool, but when a woman goes into a mikvah, it's a very, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Which direction are you going?
I'm just that it's a circumscribed set of laws in building this particular pool of water, where the water is actually channeled through direct sources, whether it's rainwater or springs, underground springs, but it should be naturally sourced water. So it's kind of a way of creating an environment where the water is completely natural. And in this way, we become the carriers of this tradition of purification in the world. So, and that really speaks to the relationships in our home, because this is really about how we bring God awareness, divine awareness into our relationships with our spouse, with our children, and the laws of the mikvah are generally referred to as family purity. So it's not just about, the woman herself, but she is embodying this for the entire family.
Beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Right. And so I heard you allude to a few things. One is this idea of purity, which you translated so powerfully, and also the idea of like life-giving moments versus not. I love that. Right. And then also this idea of taking something that might otherwise be mundane or animalistic, or like one's relations, for lack of a better term, and infusing it with a sense of holiness. Absolutely.
And one of the things I do is I teach brides before they get married, and I prepare them for marriage, which more people should be doing before, people go through a lot more preparation for most other things in life than they do for the most important thing that they're going to do in their entire life.
And you're just giving you a heads up. A few weeks after you get married, you're flying to Japan and cooking, baking 50 pounds of challah. Be ready. No, that's not what you tell them. What do you tell them?
No, most people don't end up with that experience, shockingly. But and we talk about this idea that, that it's kind of does everything in nature gets old, gets stale, passes on. That's nature. That's life. But we want to create something here that is eternal. We want to create a relationship where passion exists 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years into the future. And how do we do something? It's kind of miraculous. It kind of actually flies in the face of reason and common sense. And that's why, a marriage that is not connected to something beyond the two, that doesn't include some awareness of the eternal, is going to be bound to the laws of the universe. And we want to create a relationship that has potential to be eternal. And it really is eternal because it's generations. And a healthy, loving marriage really affects not just the couple, but worlds. So, that's a really good way. And I'm not going to get into the depth of all the laws and the whole practice, but it really is, it's a recipe for a marriage that continues to be passionate, loving, and intimate in a very real way.
Beautiful. And I know, I mentioned before challah is the most popular, but probably candles are obviously the most popular in terms of these three mitzvot among women. In terms of that's, people bringing candlesticks across from Holocaust, that kind of thing. That's pretty common in the home. Challah, you've mentioned, is kind of having a revival now. You're going into, private homes with fancy people that are bringing you in because they really want to do challah baking with you,
and they want to pass this
and they want to learn. They want to pass the tradition on. There was, to their children and their daughters, that kind of thing. I'm curious, as we've mentioned, I think candles, challah has had a major swelling lately, or rising.
Swelling, I love it.
But do you find when you talk about the mikvah, is that an area where you're seeing movement as well? Do you feel like people are more resistant to that? Some of these homes you're walking into, or these big events or private events you're doing, are people not the mikvah, it's sexist or some other thing?
No,
what are you saying?
I've seen really, I've been teaching brides for about 25 years, and there's been a big shift. I feel like the knee-jerk reaction used to be oh my God, Judaism sees a woman's period as dirty, and ew, the mikvah, and this is an ancient, some things are better left in Europe with my great-grandmother, and there's been a tremendous shift. I mean, first of all, the mikvahs that are being built in the last 20 to 25 years in America are magnificent. And they're really, they're like spas. They're better than most spas that I've been to.
Sure.
And I think that more and more, we're kind of like a little post-feminism in a positive way. So of course, in any movement, we have to, anytime we're trying to really shift anything, we go all the way over until we find center. And I think, the feminist movement has experienced kind of this type of movement where in the beginning it was like, we have to prove that we can do what men can do. And then we kind of proved that we can, and we can do it in heels with a baby and double, half the time.
Sure.
And then the question started to be like, okay, but do I want? Okay, so now I have a choice. So what do I choose? And that's, I think, where we are a little bit now. And there's there's this whole trend now with the whole trad wife thing. I don't know if you know about this. It's whole Instagram trend where people are celebrating being a trad wife or a traditional wife and just trying to bring back the value of raising a family and creating a home with all of the stuff that entails. So, you don't have to go all the way over to trad wife, but there's really just there's so much beauty and value in what a woman does that is unique to the woman that we don't have to try to be anything else. We can really find our innate power. That's kind of what I try to teach women, or to relay that message. You can really be everything and still be woman fully. Like, we don't have to inhabit a man's world to find our power. And so I think as we've come more to that realization, people are looking for things that feel uniquely feminine, that help them tap in, and they're kind of getting this deep wisdom that there is in giving our bodies time to rest, in giving ourselves the space, even within a marriage, giving yourself the space to just be you as you are as an individual, not in relation to your spouse and not in relation to your family, but just taking the time to cultivate yourself so that you can come back to your spouse and come back to your family in a way that's rejuvenated.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give you I'll pick up on that, and I'll give you an open question for our last couple of minutes, which is, we've talked a little bit around the feminine role through these 3 mitzvot, but I know this time of year, we're making our way through the Omer, we're approaching Mount Sinai, please God, we're approaching Mashiach.
Amen.
Amen. What is the unique feminine role broadly in that space? How are you thinking about those questions right now?
So,
I know that's 3 questions in there. Where you go or you want to go?
All right, I'll kind of take it where. So first of all, in terms of working towards redemption, and this personal work is never personal, because when we get to a state of deep alignment and presence, and I think especially as a woman, I'm sorry, I'm speaking as a woman here, so I can only speak to the woman, but I think, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, and I think there's a deep truth to that when the woman is joyful and present and deeply connected, then everyone around her kind of picks up on that energy. And in Kabbalistic teachings, woman is feminine, is presence, which goes beyond the need to do or create, but is really about being fully present. And so this work of internal alignment is never about ourselves, but it's really about how we can be channels for God's light in this world. And when we are a channel, then the whole world is transformed. So every night when we count, when we do this, or every day when we're doing the counting of the Omer, which is a 49-day process from Passover to the giving of the Torah, we actually say a little prayer at the end, which is really beautiful. And it says that this work that I'm doing and this particular aspect of myself that I'm working on today in this one of my 7 emotional channels, which, there's a whole process that goes on.
If people are confused, go to the Rabbi Rechman episode.
Absolutely.
Watch it again. He explained it. Keep
going. All right, there you go.
Yeah.
And you say, Ve'et taher ve'et kadesh b'kedusha shel ma'ala, and I will be purified and sanctified with the sanctity of above. Ve'al yedei zeh, and through this process, yushva shefa rav b'chol ha'olamot, that this is going to affect tremendous abundance, shefa, which is, that there's going to be tremendous abundance in all the worlds, not even just in this world, but through my own internal work of rectifying, aligning my nervous system and emotional systems. Through that work, I'm actually going to become a direct channel and bring light into all the worlds. So I think, as the woman, as sort of setting the temperature of the home and the family and the people around us, it's really important that we ourselves are able to regulate. And I think that that's part of this process, is really regulating yourself and being in alignment, so that when we receive the divine wisdom at Matan Torah, when we receive the revelation, that it's not just like a beautiful moment of inspiration, but it's something that is transformational and becomes deeply embedded in our psyche and changes who we are in a very real way. In order for that to happen, we have to work on our primal self, that part of us that is reactive perhaps, and in maybe misalignment. And when we get to that place of deep alignment in our internal systems, then the information we receive actually can become da'at, which in the Torah and Kabbalistic teachings, it's embedded knowledge, right? It's knowledge that's transformational.
Second nature.
It's not just information,
right?
But it's wisdom in a very deep, embodied sense.
Beautiful.
And that's what we're trying to do. So, we're told that the women were the catalyst for the original redemption, which was our exodus from Egypt, right? It was the women who were able to foresee a future beyond the immediate constriction and slavery and bad times and hard times.
Sure.
We sort of embody this idea of hope for a future. That's why also we go in the mikvah, because we're able to change states. We're able to recognize, I love the idea that at the essence of a woman is their womb, which is a rechem in Hebrew, and when you switch those words around, those letters, it spells machar, which is tomorrow or the future. And we really contain the future within us, and as such we sort of have a glimpse, like we're able to imagine something beyond the immediate. And that is sort of the gift of the woman, and how we first have to be able to imagine it and see it before we can work towards it. And we were the catalyst for the original Exodus, and we're told that we are going to be the catalyst for the future Exodus. And when the world comes to a place of redemption, the feminine energy is going to be the energy that is the primary energy of the universe.
Amen.
And I think that's going to be good for everyone. So I think we're working towards that.
I'm ready.
We're working
My
for
Bubby
that.
Health is ready. We're all ready.
Yeah.
We're out of time. It's set to stop. I just want to say, in addition to both of your books, which people, if you don't have them, pick them up. You can go to therisinglife.net to learn more, to book Rochie for your next private event, big event, charity event. Bring her to your community if you're not already doing that, and certainly use the book to do it in your own home.
Absolutely.
And also on Instagram, it's at Rochie Pinson. You can find her and keep up with what's happening. This has been such a treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
From
This
your
was
words
fun.
to God's ears, may we get closer to
Amen.
redemption, and may the women lead us
Amen.
there. Thank you.
We're there. We're almost there.
We're almost there. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
הנה